Hi everyone, thanks for coming back for part 2. In my last video, I was going over this table on Obama last Great Day Feast, and this was coming up in Ezekiel 16 and 17. And 17 is where it's talking about the riddle about the two eagles. And I had actually tried doing a table on that some time ago. I had put in the words Obama and riddle just to see what would come up, if his name would come up in that table, and sure enough, his name came up where it's talking about the riddle of the two eagles. And you have a great eagle in the beginning, but then you have another great eagle that comes up in verse 7. And I believe this eagle is the one that represents Christ. It's talking about the goodly vine. And then it goes on to say now to the rebellious house, know ye not what these things mean? Tell them, behold, the king of Babylon is come to Jerusalem, and hath taken the king thereof, and the princes thereof, and led them with him to Babylon, and hath taken the king's seat, and made a covenant with him, and hath taken an oath of him, and he hath also taken the mighty of the land. But the kingdom, that the kingdom might be base, that it might not lift itself up, but that by keeping of his covenant it might stand. But he rebelled against him, and sending his ambassadors to Egypt, that they might give him horses and much people. Shall he prosper? Shall he escape that doeth such things? Or shall he break the covenant and be delivered? As I live, saith the Lord God, surely in the place where the king dwelleth that made him king, whose oath he despised, and whose covenant he brake, even with him in the midst of Babylon, he shall die. Neither shall Pharaoh with his mighty army and great company make for him in the war by casting up mounts and building forts to cut off many persons, seeing he hath despised the oath by breaking the covenant, when lo, he had given his hand and hath done all these things, he shall not escape. So this is where the Antichrist breaks the covenant, apparently. Therefore thus saith the Lord God, as I live, surely mine oath that he hath despised, and my covenant that he hath broken, even it will I recompense upon his own head. And I will spread my net upon him, and he shall be taken, and my snare, and I will bring him to Babylon, and will plead with him there for his trespass, that he hath trespassed against me. And all the fugitives with all his bands shall fall by the sword, and they that remain shall be scattered toward all winds, and ye shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken it. Okay, and I'll just skip to the last verse. It says, and all the trees of the field shall know that I, the Lord, have brought down the high tree, have exalted the low tree, have dried up the green tree, and have made the dry tree to flourish. I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it. So this is talking about the king of Babylon going against Israel and breaking a covenant. And this is where Obama's name comes up in this table. You can see the great eagle right here, and you have Obama right above that. Okay, and this was coming up in the table that I did on Obama last Great Day Feast. You see the word feast coming over here in the blue. You have day over here in the lavender. Last is in the pink, and great is in the purple. And then Obama comes up, like I said. Let me just show it to you in this table. It comes up all in a row in this one. It's the same matrix, but it's just showing it all in a row here. And you see the word riddle. And then you have great eagle with great wings right here. Diverse colors right there. Okay, and that was just the third match. When you get to the fourth match, this one comes up in Daniel 5, and this is where it's talking about King Nebuchadnezzar and the writing on the wall. And so I'll try to read that chapter as well in case you're not familiar with it. But over here you see the word day, you see the word feast over here in the blue, the word great in the purple. And then you have Obama coming over here at an angle. And then last is over here in the pink. And Obama comes where it says, and his spirit was hardened. Of course, Pharaoh's heart is going to be hardened. And I'll just read that line in the table. Comes up in verse 20. It says, but when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him, and he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. He was fed with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God ruleth in the kingdom of men, and he that setteth up over it whomsoever he will. And it actually starts out over here. His name starts out over here where it says, he kept alive and whom he would. So let me see where that is. Okay, so that would be verse 19, where it says, and because of the greatness that he gave him, all the peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him, whom he would slew, and whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he raised up, and whom he would he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And so that's where Obama's name comes up, where it's saying, whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he raised up, and whom he would he put down. And before that it said, whom he would he slew. Okay, so right there is where you have Obama's name. And then it continues on to say, but when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. So Obama's name goes right through those two verses. Okay, this was coming up in Daniel 5. This is when Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he had tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, and of silver, brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. And in the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. And the king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a gold chain about his neck, and shall be the third in the ruler of the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed within him, and his lords were astonished. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, for as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. And now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. Then was Daniel brought before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, but they could not show the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee, that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another, yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty and glory and honor, and for the majesty he gave him all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he slew, and whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he set up, and whom he would he put down. This is where Obama's name begins. And when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. So that's where Obama's name is. And then it continues, and he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knowest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven. And they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, thou hast not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and his writing was written, and this is the writing that was written, many, many Tekel Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Many, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar that they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. And so I'm going to go back to the table. And so this is where Obama's name was coming up in verses 19 and 20, and beginning with verse 17 is where the interpretation is made known. And so this is where we have Obama's name, right where it talks about his spirit being hardened. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to continue in the next video, but I want to get back to the first match because that was very interesting as well. But I'll have to do that in the next video. Thanks for watching, and God bless you.